Younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever
you feel like criticizing anyone,
he told me,
just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages you've had.
In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. My tolerance does have a limit. When I came back from the East last autumn, I felt like I wanted the world to be in uniform and at a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more riotous excursions or privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby was exempt from my reaction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. There was something gorgeous about him. Some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life. It was an extraordinary gift for hope. A romantic readiness, such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. No. Gatsby turned out all right in the end. It is what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams that closed out my interest in the sorrows and elations of mankind. My family have been prominent, well-to-do people in the Middle West for 3 generations. I went to Yale, and then to war, which I enjoyed so much I came back restless. I decided to go east and learn the bond business in the spring of 22. It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America.
20 miles from New York, shot out a pair of enormous eggs.
East and west, separated only by a courtesy bay.
I lived at West Egg.
The less fashionable of the two.
I rented a weather-beaten bungalow at $80 a month, squeezed between 2 huge places that rented between $12,000 and $15,000 a season. The one on my right, a colossal affair with a tower on one side, a marble swimming pool, and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. This was Gatsby's mansion. The story of that summer really begins when I drove over to East Egg to have dinner with the Buchanans. And Daisy was my second cousin, twice removed. And I'd known Tom in college. One of those men who achieved such excellence at 21 that everything afterwards savors of anticlimax.
I'm paralyzed with happiness.
I stopped off in Chicago on my way here. A dozen people send their love.
Do they miss me?
The whole town is desolate. All the cars have left their rear wheel painted black as a mourning wreath, and there's a persistent wail all night along the North Shore.
How gorgeous. Let's go back, Tom, tomorrow. Have you seen the baby?
Oh, I'd like to.
She's 3 years old, haven't you seen her?
Never.
Well, you ought to.
What are you doing, Nick?
I'm a bond man.
Oh, who with?
Sutcliffe James.
Never heard.
You will. You will if you stay in the East.
Oh, I'll stay in the East, don't you worry. I'll be a goddamn fool to live anywhere else.
Absolutely. You live in West Egg. I know somebody there.
Oh, I don't know a single person that side of the bed.
You must know Gatsby.
Gatsby. What Gatsby?
Let's go through.
In 2 weeks, it'll be the longest day of the year. Do you always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it? I always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it.
You make me feel uncivilized, Daisy. Can we talk about crops or something?
Civilization is going to pieces. Have you read The Rise of the Cull Empires by this man Gada?
Oh, I know.
Well, it's a fun book, and everybody ought to read it. The idea is, if we don't look out, the white race will be submerged. It's all scientific, it's been proven.
Tom's getting very profound. He reads deep books with long words. What was that word?
Well, all these books are scientific. This Gada fellow's worked out the whole thing. It's up to us, who are the dominant race, to watch out, or these other races will take control of things.
We've got to beat them down.
You ought to live in California.
The idea is that we're Nordics, and we've got to produce all the things that are going to make a civilization. Science and art, all that, you see.
I love to see you at my table, Nick. You remind me of a rose. An absolute rose, doesn't he? An absolute rose.
This was untrue. I'm not even faintly like a rose. Miss Baker, I was just what? This Mr. Gatsby
Don't
spoke of is
talk.
my neighbor.
I want to hear what happens.
Is something happening?
You mean to say you don't know? I thought everybody knew.
I don't.
Why? Tom's got some woman in New York.
Got some woman.
She might have the decency not to telephone him at dinner time, don't you think?
It couldn't be helped. I looked outside for a minute and it's very romantic. There's a bird on the lawn. I think it must be a nightingale, singing away. It's romantic, isn't it, Tom?
Very romantic.
Time for this good girl to go to bed?
Jordan's playing in a tournament tomorrow over at Westchester.
Oh, you're Jordan Baker, the golfer! I've seen you on the cover of Sporting Life.
Good night. Well, wake me up at 8, won't you?
If you'll get up.
Good night, Mr. Carraway. I'll see you in a...
Oh, you will. In fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of fling you two together. You know, lock you up in linen closets, push you out to sea in a boat and all that sort of thing.
Good night. I haven't heard a word.
We don't know each other very well, Nick, even if we are cousins. You didn't come to my wedding.
I wasn't back from the war.
I've heard. Had a very bad time, Nick. I'm pretty cynical about everything. Let me tell you what I said when my daughter was born. Would you like to hear?
Very much.
It'll show you how I've gotten to feel about things. Well, she was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoned feeling and asked the nurse right away whether it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl, and so I turned my head away and wept. All right, I said. I'm glad it's a girl. And I hope she'll be a fool. It's the best thing a girl can be in this world. A beautiful little fool. You see, I think everything's terrible anyhow. Everybody thinks so, the most advanced people. And I know. I've been everywhere and seen everything and done everything. Sophisticated. God, I'm sophisticated.
The instant her voice broke off, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as if the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me.
Jordan got up. She's a nice girl. They shouldn't let her run around the country like that.
Who oughtn't to?
Her family.
Her family is one aunt about 1,000 years old. Besides, Nick's gonna look after her, aren't you, Nick? She's gonna spend lots of weekends over here this summer. I think the home influence will be very good for her.
Is she from New York?
From Louisville. Our girlhood was passed together there. And I've forgotten to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you're engaged to a girl out west.
That's right, we heard you're engaged.
It's a libel. I'm too poor.
But we heard it. We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true.
I wasn't even vaguely engaged. But their interest rather touched me. Nevertheless, I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. It seemed to me that the thing for Daisy to do was to get up. Child in arms out of the house. But apparently there were no such intentions in her head. As for the Tom, well, the fact he had some woman was really less surprising than that he'd been depressed by a book. When I went over to West End, I sat for a while in my yard. I was not alone. 50 feet away, a figure had emerged from my neighbor's house and was regarding the silver pepper of the stars. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been at the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the darkness.
About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile, as if to shrink away from a certain desolate area of land.
The Valley of Ashes. A fantastic farm where ashes grow into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens.
Where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke.
And of ash-gray men swarming and crumbling in the powdery air.
But above the grey land you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg. They look out of no face, but instead from a pair of huge, enormous spectacles set over a non-existent nose and brood over the solemn dumping ground. It was in this dismal place that I first met Tom Buchanan's
The
mistress.
fact he had one was common knowledge wherever he was known.
And his acquaintances resented his habit of sauntering around with her in public.
And though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her. I was on my way to New York with Tom on Sunday afternoon on the train. And when we passed the ash heaps, he jumped up and literally forced me from the carriage.
We're getting off. I want you to meet Myrtle.
Murder?
My girl!
He had knocked back a great deal of lunch, and still, it was a galling assumption that on a Sunday afternoon I had nothing better to do.
Nick!
He took me to a garage. Repairs. George B. Wilson. Cars bought and sold.
Hello, Wilson, man. How's business?
Wilson was a spiritless, anemic man.
Yeah, next week. I've got my man working on it now.
And already, Tom was glancing impatiently around the garage.
Well, if you feel that way about it, maybe I won't sail the car at all.
Get some chairs, why don't you, so somebody can sit down?
There was a woman at the back door. She was in the middle 30s and had a colossal vitality about her, as if all the nerves in her body were smoldering.
God, I want to see you.
Wilson had by now hurried off.
Get on the next train.
All right.
I'll meet you by the newsstand on the lower level. Terrible place, isn't it?
Awful.
Does her good to get away.
Doesn't her husband object?
Wilson, he thinks she goes to see her sister in New York. He's so dumb he doesn't know he's alive.
So Tom Buchanan, Myrtle, and I set off together to New York. Well, not quite together, for Myrtle sat in a separate carriage. I have been drunk just twice in my life, and the second time was that afternoon, so the rest of the day has a dim, hazy cast over it. I remember that Myrtle invited her sister over to the apartment Tom had bought for her. But after a fight broke out, Tom broke Myrtle's nose with his open hand. And I decided it was time to go. Throughout the summer nights, there was music from my neighbor's house.
Men and women came and went like moths.
The cars from New York packed 5 deep in the
The
drive.
bar in full swing.
And the orchestra.
No thin 5-piece
With a
affair.
whole pit full of oboes.
And
And
trombones.
saxophone.
And cornets.
And piccolos.
And
And
violins.
low and high drums.
And the halls and salons and verandas gaudy with primary colors.
Hair bobbed in strange new ways.
And rounds of cocktails floating through the gardens.
And introductions begun on the spot.
As the lights grow brighter.
And the earth lurches away from the sun.
Until the very air is alive with chatter and color and laughter and music.
I believe that I was one of the few guests who actually been invited. People who were not invited. They went there, sometimes coming and going without having met Gatsby at all.
I thought you might be.
Oh!
I remember you lived next door.
Did you come to these parties often?
I like to come. And last time I was here, I tore my dress on a chair. And within a week, I got a package with a new evening gown in it.
Did you keep it?
I did. Yeah, but there's something funny about a fellow who does a thing like that. He doesn't want any trouble from anybody.
Who doesn't?
Gatsby.
I heard he killed a man once.
She heard that from a man who knew all about it, grew up with him in Germany.
You look at him sometimes and you'll know he killed a man.
Come along, this is far too quiet for me.
face is familiar. Weren't you in the 1st Division during the war?
Why, yes. I was in the 28th Infantry.
I knew I'd seen you somewhere before. I was in the 16th until June 1918.
Oh.
Now, I've just bought a hydroplane and I'm planning to try it out in the morning. Want to come with me, old sport, just along the shore near the sound?
What time?
Any time that suits you best.
Having a good time now?
Much better, thank you. This is an unusual party for me. I haven't even met the host. This man Gatsby, I live next door, he sent his chauffeur over with an invitation.
I'm Gatsby.
What? Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought you knew, old sport. I'm afraid I'm not a very good host.
He smiled. And it was one of those rare smiles with an eternal quality of reassurance to it. It understood you. Just as you would wish to be understood, believed in you, just as you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that you had given the impression that, at your best, you hoped to convey.
If you want anything, just ask for it, old sport. Miss Becca, might I speak with you for a moment?
Who is he? Do you know?
He's just a man named Gatsby.
What is he wrong? I mean, what does he do?
Well, he told me he was an Oxford man, however I don't believe.
Why not?
I don't know, I just don't think he went there. But he throws large parties, and I like large parties. They're so intimate. I've just heard the most shocking thing. It was just astounding, but I swore I wouldn't tell him. Here I am tantalizing you. Come and see me, phone book, under the name Mr. Gurney Howard, my aunt.
Don't forget, we're going up in the hydroplane tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, old sport. Good night.
For a while I lost sight of Jordan Baker. And in Midsummer I found her again. I wasn't actually in love. But I felt a sort of tender curiosity for her. She was incurably dishonest. Yet it made no difference to me. I was casually sorry for it and then forgot.
Good afternoon, old sport. I hear you're taking Miss Baker to tea today, and I have some business in town, so I thought we'd ride up together.
I had spoken with Gatsby, perhaps a dozen times in the last month, and found, to my disappointment, that he had little to say. So my first impression that he was a man of some undefined consequence had gradually faded, and he had simply become the proprietor of the elaborate house next door.
Look here, old sport. What's your opinion of me, anyhow?
Well, I don't really...
Well, I'm going to tell you something. Something about my life. I wouldn't want you to get the wrong idea from all these stories you hear.
Oh, well, I haven't heard...
I'm telling you the God's truth. God's truth about myself. I'm the son of some wealthy people from the Middle West, all dead now. I was brought up in America, but educated at Oxford, because all of my ancestors have been educated there for a long time. It's a family tradition.
What part of the Middle
San
West?
Francisco.
I see.
My family all died, and I came into a good deal of money. After that, I lived like a young Roger in all the capitals of Europe. Paris, Venice, Rome. Collecting jewels, hunting game, things for myself only. Then came the war, old sport. I accepted a commission as first lieutenant when it began. Then I was promoted to major, and every allied government gave me a decoration. Even Montenegro. Little Montenegro down on the Adriatic Sea. I'm going to make a big request of you today, so I thought you ought to know something about me. I wouldn't want you to get the wrong impression from all these stories you hear. You see, I often find myself among strangers because I drift here and there trying to forget the sad things that have happened to me. You'll hear all about it this afternoon.
Well, I'm taking Miss Baker to tea.
Miss Baker has kindly consented to talk to you about this matter.
I hadn't the faintest idea what this matter was. But I was more annoyed than interested. I hadn't asked Jordan to tea to discuss Mr. J. Gatsby. I was certain his request would be something utterly fantastical. Just for a moment, I was sorry I'd ever set foot on his overpopulated lawn.
It seemed romantic to me, which is why I've remembered the incident ever since. It was October 1917. Daisy was 18, 2 years older than me, and by far the most popular of all the young girls in Louisville. I came across her house one morning and saw her sitting with a lieutenant I'd never seen before. They were so engrossed in each other, she didn't see me until I was 5 feet away.
Jordan, would you come here, please?
I was flattered she wanted to speak to me. Because of all the older girls, I admired her the most.
Are you going to the Red Cross to make bandages?
I told her that I was.
Would you tell them I can't come today?
The officer was looking at Daisy in a way that all young women want to be looked at sometime. His name was J. Gatsby, and I didn't see him again for over 4 years. Even after I met him on Long Island, I didn't realize it was the same man. Daisy had her debut after the armistice, and in June, she married Tom Buchanan of Chicago with more pomp and circumstance than Louisville ever knew before. I was a bridesmaid, and the day before the wedding, he gave her a string of pearls valued at $350,000. I went into her room and found her lying on her bed with a bottle of Sauternes in one hand and a letter in the other, as drunk as a monkey.
Congratulate me. Never had a drink before, but oh, I do enjoy it.
I was scared, I can tell you. I'd never seen a girl like that before. She groped around in a wastebasket and pulled out the string of pearls.
Take them downstairs and give them back to whoever they belong to. Tell them all that Daisy's changed her mind. Say, Daisy's changed her mind.
She began to cry. And so I rushed out, found a maid, we locked the door and got her into a cold bath. She didn't let go of the letter. She took it into the tub with her and only let me put it in the soap dish when she saw that it was coming to pieces. She didn't say another word. Half an hour later, we walked out the room, the pearls were around her neck, and the incident was over. She married Tom the next day without so much as a shiver. I saw them in their honeymoon in Santa Barbara. Thought I'd never seen a girl so mad about her husband.
It's a strange coincidence. The two of them coming together after all this time.
But it's no coincidence at all.
Why not?
Gatsby bought that house so that Daisy would be just across the bay. A week after I left them in Santa Barbara, Tom ran his car into a wagon and ripped off the front wheel. It got into all the papers because the girl who was with him broke her arm. She was a chambermaid at the Santa Barbara Hotel. And it's happened since in Cannes, Deauville, Chicago, and now this garage man's wife. Gatsby wants to know if you'll invite Daisy over for tea and then let him come over.
Did I have to know all that for him to ask such a little thing?
He's worried. He's waited so long. He thought you might be offended.
Why didn't he ask you to arrange a meeting?
He wants her to see his house, and yours is right next door.
Ah.
I think he half expected her to walk into one of his parties, but she never did. She had no idea he was here until just 6 weeks ago. He began asking people casually if they knew her, and I was the first he found. It was that night I spoke with him at his dance.
Does Daisy want to see Gatsby?
She's not to know. But Gatsby doesn't want her to know. You're just supposed to invite her to tea.
How about the day after tomorrow? I told her not to bring Tom.
What?
I told her not to bring Tom.
Had your grass cut?
I noticed.
Is everything all right?
With the grass?
One of the papers said they called the rain would stop about 4.
Well, that's not...
Have you got everything you need by the way of tea?
I think so.
Look here, old sport. You don't make much money, do you? I'm sorry? I didn't think you did. If you'll pardon my deceit. I carry on a little business on the side, a sort of sideline thing. And I thought that if you didn't make very much, well, you're selling bonds, aren't you, old sport?
Trying to.
Well, this would interest you. It wouldn't take up much of your time, and you might make a nice little bit of money. It happens to be a rather confidential sort of thing.
I've got my hands full just now, Jay. I'm much obliged, but I can't take on any more work. It's a favor, Jay. Just a favor.
Grass looks very good. I'm going home. What? Nobody's coming to tea. It's too late. I can't wait all
Don't be silly.
day.
It's only just 4.
Is this absolutely where you live, my dearest one?
Absolutely.
I told the chauffeur to go far away for an hour. Nicky, darling, are you in love with me?
I'm sorry.
Why else would I have to come alone?
You know what? Well, that's funny.
What's funny? Certainly, I'm awfully glad to see you again.
We've met before.
We haven't met for many years.
5 years next November. Where are you going?
To make tea. I'll be back in an
Now,
hour.
I've got to talk to you about something. Oh, God.
What's the matter?
This is a terrible mistake. A terrible mistake.
You're just embarrassed. Daisy's embarrassed too.
She's embarrassed.
Just as much as you are.
Don't talk so loud.
You're acting like a little boy. Not only that, but you're rude. Daisy's in there all alone. I walked out the back way. As Gatsby had when he had made his nervous circuit of the garden, and ran for a huge black knotted tree, whose massed leaves made of fabric against the rain. After half an hour, the sun came out, and I went back into the house, making every noise possible short of pushing over the stove in the kitchen. I don't believe they heard a sound.
Well, hello, old sport.
It stopped raining.
Has it? Well, what do you think of that? It stopped raining.
I'm glad, Jayne.
I want you and Daisy to come over to my house. I'd like to show her around.
Are you sure you want me to come?
Absolutely, old sport.
Oh, the chauffeur will be back. I'll tell him to drive around.
Tell him to
How long?
leave. I'll drive you home. Took me just 3 years to earn the money that bought that house.
Thought you inherited your money.
I did, old sport, but I lost most of it in the big panic after the war.
What business are you in?
That's my affair. I mean, I was in the oil business and then I was in the drug business, but I'm not in either one now.
That huge place up there.
Do you like it?
I love it, but I don't see how you live there all alone.
I keep it full of interesting people who do interesting things, celebrated people.
Inside, we wandered through Marie Antoinette music rooms and restoration salons.
I call this the Merton College Library.
Through period bedrooms swathed in silk.
This is my study.
For some reason, I was reminded of some gossip I'd heard at Gatsby's last party.
Would you like some chartreuse?
Someone had said he was a nephew or a cousin of Kaiser Wilhelm.
I'd adore some.
Another that he was a German spy during the war.
If this rain ever stops, I'll show you the yacht or the hydroplane.
Somebody had said he didn't even live in a house at all.
You didn't say you had a yacht.
But in a boat that looked like a house that sailed up and down the Long Island shore.
It's the funniest thing.
He hadn't ceased looking at Daisy.
I've got a man in England who buys me shirts.
And it was as if he revalued everything, according to the level of response it drew from her.
He sends over a new selection at the beginning of each season.
5 years struggled on Daisy's lips, but all she could manage was.
They're such beautiful shirts. It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before.
wasn't for the mist, we could see your house just across the bay. There's a green light that shines all night at the end of your dock.
Almost 5 years. There must have been moments, even in that afternoon, when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams. Not through her own fault, but because of the colossal vitality of his illusion. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. They had forgotten me. I was within and without. I looked once more at them, and they back at me, remotely, possessed by intense life. And I left the room, down the marble steps into the ring, leaving them there together. For several weeks, I didn't see Gatsby, or speak to him on the phone. Mostly, I was in New York, trotting around with Jordan and trying to ingratiate myself with her senile aunt. I felt that what was now happening between he and Daisy had been somehow inevitable. It had been brewing for 5 years, and it would be futile to moralize. Still, I was a little shocked at my own complicity. But I finally went over again one Sunday afternoon, and I hadn't been in there 2 minutes when Tom Buchanan was shown in.
I'm delighted to see you. I'm delighted that you dropped in. Sit right down, I'll have something to drink for you in just a minute.
I won't trouble you.
No trouble at all, old sport.
It's good of you, but I won't.
How did you find the roads?
Very good roads around here.
Almost as good as the city roads, I think.
I know your wife.
That's so. You live near here, Nick?
Next door.
That's so. Mr. Gatsby, my wife and I were thinking about coming to your next party. What do you say?
Certainly. I'd be delighted to have you. Excuse me, gentlemen.
I wonder where the devil he met Daisy. I mean, maybe old-fashioned in my ideas, but women run around too much these days to suit me. I mean, all kinds of crazy fish.
The following Saturday night, Tom and Daisy came to Gatsby's party. Perhaps their presence gave the evening its peculiar quality. I felt an unpleasantness in the air, a pervading harshness that hadn't been there before.
These things excite me so.
Look around.
I'm looking around and having a marvelous time.
You must see the faces of many people you've heard about.
Well, we don't go around very much. In fact, I was just thinking, I don't know a soul here.
I'll make some introductions.
He just needs a drink and he'll be as right as the rest of us. Want to find the bar, Tom? In case you need to take down any addresses.
Anyhow, some big bootlegger.
Where do you hear that?
I didn't hear it, I imagined it. All these newly rich people are just big bootleggers, you know?
Not Gatsby.
He certainly must have strained himself to put this menagerie together.
Lots of people come who haven't been invited.
They simply force their way, and he's too polite to say no.
Well, I'd like to know who he is and what he does.
I can tell you right now, he owns a lot of drugstores, built them up himself.
Aside from the half hour she had spent with Gatsby, Daisy hadn't had a good time. The party offended her, for she was appalled by West Egg, for she found awful what she failed to understand. Hadn't enjoyed myself much either. What had amused me so much 2 weeks before had now turned septic on the end.
She didn't like it.
Of course she did.
She didn't like it. She didn't have a good time. I feel far away from her. It's hard to make her understand.
About the dance?
The dance? Old sport, the dance is unimportant.
He wanted nothing less of Daisy than that she should go to Tom and say, I never loved you. With that sentence, she could obliterate 4 years, and they could start to decide upon the more practical measures to be taken. One of them was that after they were married, they'd go back to Louisville. Just as if it were all 5 years ago.
She didn't like it. She didn't understand. She used to be able to understand. We'd sit for hours.
You mustn't expect too much of her. You can't repeat the past.
You can't repeat the past. Why, of course you can, old sport. I'm gonna fix everything just like it used to be. She'll see.
He spoke a lot about the past. And now I realized that he wanted to recover something. Some idea of himself, perhaps, that had gone into loving Daisy. His mind had been confused and disordered since then. Since that moment, he had kissed her and she had blossomed for him like a flower. And perhaps if he could go back to the start and go over it all slowly, he could find out what that thing was. It was when suspicions about Gatsby were at their highest that the lights fell to go on in his house one Saturday night. Wondering if he were sick, I went over and found out that every servant in the house had been dismissed the week before and replaced with half a dozen others. Although the opinion was that these people were not servants at all. He wanted people who wouldn't gossip. Daisy visited him often in the afternoons.
I wish I'd done everything on earth with you.
The next day was broiling. Almost the last. Certainly the warmest of the summer. Daisy had telephoned me to invite me to lunch. Jordan and Tom would be there, and to my amazement, so would Gatsby.
I can't move.
Have you been out on the course today?
Not in this heat. I almost crashed my car on the way here.
You're a rotten driver. You ought to be more careful, or you oughtn't to drive at all.
I am careful.
No, you're not.
Well, other people are.
What's that got to do with it?
They'll stay out of my way. It takes two to make an accident.
What if you meet someone just as careless as yourself?
I hope I never do. I hate careless people. That's why I like you.
What about Tom Buchanan, the athlete?
That's rumor is that's his girl on the telephone.
Well, if that's the way you feel about it, maybe I won't steal the car at all. I'm under no obligations to you at all. And as for you bothering me about lunch, I won't stand that at all.
He's holding down the receiver.
No, he's not. It's a bona fide deal. I happen to know about it.
You know I love you.
You forget there's a lady present?
Well, you kiss Nick too.
What low vulgar girl?
I don't care.
Mr. Gatsby, I'm certainly glad to see you. Nick, you know I read somewhere the sun's getting hotter every year. Seems one of these days the earth is going to fall into the sun. Oh, wait a minute, the sun is getting colder every year.
What'll we do with ourselves this afternoon? And the day after that in the next 30 years.
Don't be morbid. Life starts all over again when it gets crisp in the fall.
Yeah, but it's so hot and everything's so confused. Why don't we go into town? Who wants to go into town? You look so cool. You always look so cool. You remind me of the advertisement. You know, the man in the
All right. I'm perfectly willing to go to town. Come on, we're all going to town. Well, come on, what's the matter? If we're going to town, let's start.
Shall we take anything to drink?
I'll get some whiskey.
Should we all take my car?
Is this Standish ship?
Yes.
Well, you take my coupe, and I'll drive your car to town.
I don't think there's much gas.
If I need to fill up, I can stop at a drugstore. You can buy anything in a drugstore nowadays.
I suppose you can.
Come on, Daisy, I'll take you in Mr. Gatsby's circus wagon.
You take Nick and Jordan. We'll follow you in the coupe.
Tom had looked at Daisy, as if she was someone she had recognized a long time ago. He knew that Jordan and I must have known all along. And yet we all got into Gatsby's car and shot off into the oppressive heat, leaving the other two out of sight behind us.
You think I'm pretty dumb, don't you? Well, perhaps I am, but I have almost a second sight sometimes that tells me what to do. Maybe you don't believe that, but science. I made a little investigation into this fellow. Could have gone deeper if I'd known.
Found he was an Oxford man.
An Oxford man? Like hell he is, Oxford, New Mexico or something like that.
Listen, Tom, if you're gonna be such a snob, why did you invite him to lunch?
Daisy invited him. She knew before we were married, God knows where.
Is there enough gasoline?
Enough to get us to town.
There's a garage just over there. I don't want to get stalled in this baking heat.
Wilson slid to a stop outside Wilson's grey garage.
Let's have some gas. What do you think we stop for? Am I the view?
Wilson unscrewed the cap of the tank. His face was even more colorless than before. In the sunlight, his face was green.
Been
And
here
he
too
began to tell
long.
Tom about his tale to go west.
We've been here too long.
Wilson said.
Gotta get away. Me and my wife have gotta get away.
Your wife does.
She's been talking about it 10 years. And now she's going whether she wants to or not.
What do I owe you?
She got wised up to something funny the last 2 days. That's why I want to get away.
What do I owe you, Wilson?
Over the ash heaps, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg kept their vigil. The coupe flashed by us in a flurry of dust and a flash of a waving hand. In a window over the garage, the curtains moved aside a little, and Myrtle Wilson was purring down at the car. Her face, one emotion crept over another, and her eyes, wide with jealous terror, were not fixed on Tom, but on Jordan, whom she took to be his wife. Wilson's suspicions had so far not yet alighted on Tom, although it was clear that Tom was feeling the hot whips of panic. His wife and his mistress, until an hour ago, secure and inviolate, were now slipping from his control.
Those movies around 50th Street are cool. I love New York in the summer when everyone's away. There's something very sensuous about it.
You, Tom, Nick, Jordan, where are we going?
How about the movies?
It's too hot. You go. We'll ride around and meet you after.
We can't argue about it here. You follow me to Southside Central Park, outside the plaza.
Several times Tom turned his head to look back, and if the traffic delayed, he'd turn around and see if they'd come into sight. I have an idea that he thought they were going to dart down a side street and out of his life forever, but they didn't. And we all took the less explicable step of engaging a suite in the Plaza Hotel.
It's a swell suite.
Open another window.
They're on anymore.
Well, we'd better telephone for that.
The thing to do is forget about the heat. You make it 10 times worse by grabbing about it.
Why not let her alone, old sport? You're the one who wanted to come to town.
That's a great expression of yours, isn't it?
What is?
Oh, this old sport business. Why did you pick that up?
Now see here, Tom. If you're going to make personal remarks, I won't stay another
Mr.
minute.
Gatsby, I understand you're an Oxford man.
Not exactly.
Oh, yes, I understand that you went to Oxford.
Yes, I went there.
I'd like to know when.
You'd like to know when?
I would.
1919. I only stayed 5 months. That's why I can't really call myself an Oxford man. It was an opportunity they gave to some of the officers after the armistice. We could go to any of the universities in England or France.
Open the whiskey, Tom. Then you won't seem so stupid to
Now, wait a minute. I want to ask Mrs. Gatsby one more question.
Go on.
What kind of row are you trying to cause in my house anyhow?
He isn't causing a row. You're causing a row. Please, have a little self-control.
Self-control? Well, I suppose the latest thing is to sit back and let Mr. Nobody from nowhere make love to your wife. Well, if that's the idea, you can count me out. Nowadays, people begin by sneering at family life and family institutions. And next thing, they'll throw everything overboard and have intermarriage between black and white.
Well, we're all white here.
I know I'm not very popular. I don't give big parties. I suppose you have to turn a house to a pigsty in order to have any friends in the modern.
I've got something to tell you, old sport.
Please don't. Please, let's go home. Why don't we all go home?
That's a good idea. Come on, Tom. Nobody
Now, I want to know what Mr. Gatsby has to tell me.
Your wife doesn't love you. She's never loved you, she loves me.
You must be crazy.
She's never loved you, do you hear? She only married you because I was poor and she was tired of waiting for me. It was a terrible, terrible mistake, but in her heart, she never loved anyone except me.
Look, I think Jordan...
Nobody's going anywhere.
Tom, please.
Sit down, Daisy. What's been going on, huh? I want to hear all about
I
it.
told you what's been going on 5 years and you didn't know.
You've been seeing this fellow for 5 years.
No, not seeing, no. We couldn't meet, but both of us loved each other all that time and you didn't know. I used to laugh sometimes to think that you didn't know.
You're crazy. I can't talk about what happened 5 years ago. I didn't know Daisy then. But I'll be damned if I see how you got within a mile of her unless you brought the groceries to the back door. And all the rest of that's a goddamn lie, because Daisy loved me when she married me, and she loves me now.
No.
Oh, she does, though. It's just that sometimes she gets foolish ideas in her head and she doesn't know what she's doing.
My God, Tom.
And what's more, I love Daisy too. I mean, once in a while I go off on a spree. I make a fool of myself, but I always come back. And in my heart, I love Daisy all the time.
You're revolting. Do you know how I left Chicago? I'm surprised I didn't treat you to the story of that little spree.
Daisy, you don't have to worry about that anymore. Just tell him the truth and it's all wiped out forever. Tell him that you didn't love him.
Why, how could I love him? Possibly.
You never loved him.
Daisy's eyes fell on Jordan and I with a sort of appeal. As though she realized at last what she was doing, and as though, after all this, she hadn't intended to do anything at all. It was done now. It was too late.
I never loved him.
Not a Capuline?
No.
At that time, I carried you down from the punch bar to keep your shoes dry. Daisy!
Please don't.
Daisy!
I didn't want too much. I love you now. Isn't that enough? I can't help what's past. I loved him once, but I love you too.
You love me too.
Even that's a lie. She didn't know you were alive. But there's things between Daisy and me that you'll never know. Things that neither of us can ever
Look,
forget.
I want to speak to Daisy alone. She's all excited now.
Even alone, I can't say I never loved Tom. It wouldn't be true.
Well, of course it would.
As if it mattered to you.
Of course it matters. I'm going to take better care of you from now on.
You don't understand. You're not going to take care of her.
Oh, I'm
anymore.
not. Why is that?
Daisy's leaving you.
Nonsense.
No, I am though.
She is not leaving me. And certainly not for a common swindler. We'd have to steal the ring you put on her
No, I
finger.
won't stand this. Please, let's
I made a little investigation of your affairs, and I found out what your drugstores were. He bought up a load of side street drugstores here and in Chicago, and he sold great alcohol over the counter. I picked him for a bootleg the first minute I saw him, and I wasn't far wrong. I'm surprised he didn't try to drag you into it. My God, he has.
And what about it?
What about it? What about it, he says. I'll tell you what it's about. We're different to you. They are, I am, she is. We were born different. It's in our blood. Now you can throw as many parties and drive as many fancy cars and call everybody old sport as many times as you want. But you'll never be like us. Not truly. We're old money. You can't buy breeding like ours. You can't buy the ancestry that runs our
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Excuse me. I appear to have lost my temper. Daisy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I just lost my temper. Listen, you can't believe what he says. It's slander, Daisy. Libel. He's making up stories, Daisy. Making up lies that turn you against me. Everything he says, everything everyone else says about me, none of it's true, not a single word.
Please, Tom, I can't stand this anymore.
You two start on home, Daisy. And Mr. Gatsby's call. Well, go on. He won't annoy you. I think he realizes his presumptuous little flirtation is over. You want any of this stuff, Jordan? Nick? Nick?
What?
You want it?
No. Just remembered, today's my birthday. The death car, as the newspapers called it, had been huge and yellow. And it didn't stop. It came out of the gathering darkness, wavered for a moment, and then swerved around the next bend.
Wreck!
Tom said, as we were still some distance away.
Well, that's good. Wilson have no business at last.
He slowed down, without any intention of stopping, until the hushed, intent faces from inside the garage forced him to slow down.
Well, there's some bad trouble here.
We stopped. We got out of the coupe and poured inside the garage. The lifeless body of a woman lay, half covered on a table.
What do you want, fella?
What happened, officer?
Auto hit her. Instantly killed her.
Instantly killed.
She ran out in a road. Son of a bitch didn't even stop his car. It was a yellow car, big yellow car, new.
Going where?
One coming, one going, see?
But there was two cars.
One going each way.
She had run out into the road, waving her hands and shouting.
Beat me! Throw me down and beat me, you dirty little coward!
And Wilson had shouted back,
God knows what you've been doing. Everything you've been doing. You may fool me, but you can't fool God. God sees everything.
but before he could do anything, the business was over. The other car, the one going toward New York, came to a stop 100 yards beyond. The driver got out and went back to Myrtle Wilson. Her life, violently extinguished, laying in the road, her blood mingling in the dust.
Listen,
Tom was saying to Wilson,
I just got here a minute ago from New York. That yellow monstrosity I was driving this afternoon isn't mine. You here? I haven't seen it all afternoon.
he spoke to him quietly and urgently for a moment, until we all got out of the garage, back to the coupe, and drove. We drove slowly until around the next bend. And then after that, he put his foot down hard, along through the night.
A goddamn coward. He didn't even stop his car.
Daisy's home.
I ought to have dropped you in West Egg, Nick. There's nothing we can do tonight. I'll telephone for a taxi to take you home. You and Jordan better go in the kitchen. They'll get you some supper if you want.
No thanks. But I'd be glad if you could order me a taxi. I'll wait outside.
Won't you come in, Nick?
No, thanks.
But it's only 1:30.
I've had enough for one day.
Nick. Did you see any trouble on the road?
Yes.
Was she killed?
Yes!
I thought so. I told Daisy I thought so. I suppose it's better that the shock should all come at once. She studied pretty well. We got home by a side road. The car's in my garage. I don't think anybody saw us, but of course I can't be sure.
I disliked him so much by this time that I didn't find it necessary to tell him he was wrong.
Who was the woman?
Her name was Wilson. She was... How the devil did it happen?
I tried to swing the wheel, but Daisy had already put it.
Daisy was driving.
Yes, but of course I'll say I was. You see, when we left New York, she was very nervous, and she thought it would steady her to drive. And this just as we were passing a car coming the other way. It seemed like she wanted to talk to us, thought we were somebody she knew. But at first, Daisy turned away from the woman towards the other car, and then she lost her nerve and turned back. The second my hand reached the wheel, I felt the shock. Must have killed her instantly. Victor, open! Tell me, old sport. Daisy stepped on it. I tried to stop her, but she couldn't. I'm just gonna wait here and see if he tries to bother her about any of that unpleasantness this afternoon. She's locked herself in a room, and if he tries any brutality, she's going to turn the light out and on again.
He won't touch her. He's not thinking about her.
I don't trust him, old sport.
How long are you going to wait?
All night, if necessary.
Wait here. I'll see if there's a sign of a commotion. Tom and Daisy were stood opposite each other. Tom was talking intently at her. And in his earnestness, his hand had taken hers. Once in a while, she looked up at him and nodded in agreement. They weren't happy. And yet they weren't unhappy either. There was an unmistakable air of natural intimacy between them.
It's all quiet up there.
Yes. Now come home and get some sleep.
I want to wait here until Daisy goes to bed. Good night, old sport.
You want to go away. It's pretty certain they'll trace your...
Go away now, old sport.
Go to Atlantic City for a week, or up to Montreal.
I can't describe to you how surprised I was to find out I loved her, old sport. In Louisville for a while, I even hoped that she'd throw me over, but she didn't. Because she loved me too. She thought I knew a lot because I knew different things from her. And then all of a sudden I was falling deeper and deeper in love, and I didn't care.
It was this night that he told me the strange story of his past. Legally, he was James Gatz of North Dakota. But in his heart had been a constant, turbulent rider. And he had been haunted by the most fantastic conceits in reaction to his poverty.
And then I met a man, a millionaire named Dan Cody.
And the two of them sailed together 3 times around the continent.
In a yacht.
But Cody died.
Then came the war.
In which Gatsby did extraordinarily well. And during which he met Daisy. It excited him that many other men were in love with her. It increased her value in his eyes.
I knew I'd stumbled into Daisy's life by some colossal accident.
So he made the most of his time. He took what he could, ravenously, took her one October night, because he had no right to take her hand.
I ought to have despised myself, old sport.
For he had intended to take what he could and go.
But I hadn't realized just how extraordinary a nice girl could be. I felt married to her. After the armistice, I tried frantically to get home, but some misunderstanding or complications sent me to Oxford instead.
He grew worried. There was a quality of nervous despair to Daisy's letters.
She couldn't see why I couldn't come. She was young. There was the pressure of the world outside.
And all the while, something within her was crying out for decision.
She wanted her life shaped now, immediately.
And this decision must be made by some force of love, of money, of unquestionable practicality. That force came in the arrival of Tom Buchanan.
Doubtless, there was a certain struggle.
And a certain relief. Daisy's letter reached Gatsby while he was still at Oxford.
I don't think she ever loved him, old sport. You must remember that this afternoon she was very excited, and he told her those things that made it look like I was some kind of cheap shopper. It frightened her, and the result was that she hardly knew what she was saying. Of course, she might have loved him just for a minute when they were first married, and loved me more even then, do you see?
That'll be the taxi. I'll call you up.
Do, old sport.
And I'll call you about noon.
I suppose Daisy will call too.
I suppose so.
Goodbye, old sport.
They're rotten crap. You're worth the whole damn bunch put together. I've always been glad I said that. It was the only compliment I ever paid him because I disapproved of him from beginning to end. First he nodded, and then his face broke into that radiant smile. As if we'd been in ecstatic cahoots on that fact the whole time. I hadn't want to go to the city. It wasn't worth a decent stroke of work. No, I tried for a while. I fell asleep in my swivel chair. The phone rang about noon.
I've left Daisy's house. I'm going down to Southampton this afternoon. You weren't so nice to me last night.
How could it have mattered then?
However, I want to see you.
I want to see you too.
Suppose I don't go to Southampton and come into town this afternoon.
No, I don't think this afternoon.
Very well.
It's impossible this afternoon.
I see.
I don't know which of us hung up. But I knew I didn't care. I tried ringing Gatsby's, but the line was busy. I tried 5 times before taking out my train timetable. I drew a circle around the 3:50. At 2 o'clock, Gatsby put on his bathing suit and told the butler that if anyone telephoned, word was to be brought to him at the pool. No telephone message arrived, although the butler waited until 4 o'clock. I have an idea that Gatsby himself didn't believe he would come. Perhaps he no longer cared. He must have felt that he had lost the warm old world, paid a high price for living too long with a single dream. The chauffeur heard the shots. Afterwards, he said that he didn't think anything much about them. I had driven directly from the station to Gatsby's house. I saw a barely perceptible movement in the water as the fresh flow urged its way from one end toward the drain at the other. And a thin red circle in the water. After we had dealt with Gatsby toward the house, the gardener saw Wilson's body a little way off in the grass. And so the Holocaust was complete. There was a funeral. Despite the hundreds upon hundreds of guests who had attended Gatsby's parties, only myself, Gatsby's father, and the servant showed up. Daisy had gone away with Tom and their daughter, and sent neither a note nor a flower. I see now that this has been a story of the West. Tom, Gatsby, Jordan, Daisy, and I were all Westerners. And perhaps we possessed some common deficiency that made us subtly unadaptable to Eastern life. After Gatsby's death, the East was haunted for me. And so, when the fall came, I decided to come home. But there was one thing to be done. An awkward thing that perhaps it would be better to leave alone.
It's quite all right, Mr. Carraway. I'm engaged to be married.
I doubted this. Though there were several men she could have married at the nod of her head. And just for a minute I wondered whether I wasn't making a mistake.
Nevertheless, you did throw me over. You threw me over on the telephone. I don't give a damn about you now, but it was a new experience for me. It was careless of me to make such a wrong guess. I thought you were an honest, straightforward kind of person. I thought it was your secret pride.
I'm 30. I'm 5 years too old to lie to myself and call it honor. One day in late October, I was walking through New York and I spotted Tom and Daisy walking along Fifth Avenue. Before overtaking them, I turned back, but they saw me.
What's the matter, Nick? Do you object to shaking hands with me?
Yes. You know what I think of you.
You're crazy, Nick. Crazy as hell. I don't know what's the matter with you.
What do you say to Wilson?
I told him the truth. He came in the door when we were getting ready to leave. And when I sent down word and we went in, he tried to force his way upstairs. He was crazy enough to kill me if I hadn't told him to own the car. His hand was on a revolver in his pocket every minute he was in the house. And so what if I told him? That fella had it coming to him. He threw dust in your eyes like he did in Daisy's. But he ran over Myrtle like a dog. He didn't even stop his car.
They were careless people. Tom and Daisy. And Jordan too, perhaps. They smashed up things. And people. And then retreated back into their money. And their vast carelessness. And let other people clear up the mess they had made. When I went over to West Egg, I looked over to Gatsby's house for a final time. I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he had first picked out the green light. It must have seemed so close then that he could hardly fail to grasp it.
Gatsby believed in the green light.
The idealized future that year by year recedes before us.
It eluded us then, but that's no matter.
Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms further.
And so we beat on. Boats against the current. Borne back. Ceaselessly into the past.